Okay, Norwood. What is the first word on the list?
Armaments.
Okay. The second?
Alliance.
Mm-hmm.
Enzyme is the third one. Escalation is the fourth. Non-motile is the fifth one.
Okay.
Opulence is the sixth one.
Okay.
Armistice is the seventh.
Okay.
Obscurity is the eighth one.
All right.
Immunodeficiency is the ninth one.
All right.
Meditated is the 10th.
All right.
Mandates is the 11th. Infectious is the 12th. Nuclear is the 13th.
Okay.
Chromosome is the 14th. Protestations is the 15th. Reparations is the 16th. Chauffeur is the 17th. 18 is mutated. 19 is hereditary. And 20 is heterotropic.
Very good. Okay. We're done with that. And then I'm going to ask you, like, concept questions. Okay, it says, tell me what you know about the country of Vietnam.
Country of Vietnam. During 1965 to about 1974 was when the Vietnam War era happened. A lot of U.S. troops, about 60,000 were killed or more. Over 20,000 are still missing there or MIA. Vietnam is a diverse country with lots of jungles, large tropics. In the Southeast Asia area, it's near Cambodia, a very poor country as well, along with Cambodia. A lot of wars have happened there, and they're still deactivating bombs from the Vietnam War there.
Okay, so where is it located?
Southeast Asia.
Okay.
Near Laos and Cambodia.
Okay. What does civilian mean?
Civilian. Civilian means someone who is just of the people, for the people, with just a regular position in economics and in society. Regular people just living their lives, not politicians
Alright.
or anybody famous. Anything else?
I'm looking. What does escalation mean?
Escalation. Like escalating the situation. Escalation means increasing of, or the escalation of the situation.
Okay. What is invasion?
Invasion. Invasion means to attack or to come about and come upon people or a group of animals or such, depending on the situation given. Which means it could be an invasion of ants on another rival ant colony. Fighting over food, territory, or land.
Very good. And then, can you read the passage where the ashes are?
Where the ashes are. Part 1. Wake up, my mother shouted. We've got to get out of here. How can you sleep through all this? She pulled the covers off me, handed me my clothes, and rushed me out of the room. Wait, I cried out, throwing off my pajamas, one leg in and one out of my dark blue school trousers. I stumbled over to my sister Diu Ha's room. My mother was yelling, "Are you deaf? Get out of here! We're going downstairs." It was 5 in the morning. Explosions and gunfire echoed through the high-ceilinged rooms of the government's guest house. Arched corridors surrounded the 20 bedrooms on the second floor of the massive French-style mansion. My parents had taken the master suite at the end of the hall, while my two sisters and I had large rooms next to one another. We had arrived at the end of January 1968, 2 days before the Lunar New Year. Our family were the only guests in the building. Rather than having us stay at my grandfather's small house, my father felt we would be safer at the guest house, where extra platoons of local soldiers had been assigned to protect him. He also preferred the guest house because it was built along the bank of the river in the Hue, the old imperial city, and away from the town's noisy center. The nearby train station was dysfunctional, since the war had disrupted all but a few railway lines. For many years, my father had been working for the government of South Vietnam, assigned to Central Vietnam as a civilian deputy to the military governor. He was based in Da Nang, a coastal town just over an hour's drive from Hue. He sent us to visit his parents regularly, especially at holidays. He came along on this holiday visit for the Lunar New Year, Tet, in 1968. Although my father had been warned about a possible escalation in the fighting, he said to my mother, "There's a ceasefire. It's New Year's. We'll be safe." But he abandoned his plan to drive and instead arranged for a flight to Hue. We landed at the Po Bai airport in mid-afternoon. The road into town had been taken over by an endless convoy of tanks and army trucks transporting U.S. soldiers, most likely towards the Quezon, an American base that had been under siege for several months. Along with a few other civilian cars, small trucks, and innumerable motorcycles, we had inched our way towards Hue. I kept looking out the car window, glimpsing rice fields here and there. Mostly, though, the view was blocked by the olive-green steel of tanks and trucks. My mother sought to distract us. "You kids are going to be spoiled this year. I bet your grandparents will have lots of treats for you. But I want you to behave. Settle it in at the guest house." On the second night of our stay, my mother and sisters and I fell asleep just after 12. Insulated by its thick walls and heavy curtains, endless rounds of firecrackers went off as the people of Hue celebrated the arrival of Tet. No one knew that along with the Year of the Monkey, the dreaded Viet Cong soldiers had also arrived. No one could tell when the firecrackers stopped and the gunfire began. Diu Hai and I followed my mother into my other sister's room. Diu Quayon hid herself under a pile of blankets. Ma shook her. "Come on, we're going downstairs." As she started to rifle through the Diu Quang's drawers, grabbing clothes for her to change into, she said to Diu Ha and me, "Go see if your father's downstairs and stay with him." We rushed down the corridors towards the double staircase. It was a marble steps formed a half circle framed by intricately carved banister. A bullet shattered a porthole as we skipped down the steps. Diu Ha screamed. Pieces of glass and marble flew by. We raced past the elephant trunks in the huge vestibule and towards the reception hall. A chilly wind blew through the huge room. Someone had opened the drapes and shutters of the dozens of windows rising from knee level to 10 feet above my head, each framing a view of the river of the perfumed Song Huong. In the somber light, I could make out dark foliage swaying by the riverbank as a coat of morning mist rose above the water. Nature paints winter scenes in hue in shades of gray, but this morning I could see rapid bursts of orange and red fire coming through from behind the bushes. A flare shot out from the far distance, exploding with a thud. It hung from a small parachute and it cast a brilliant midday light over a large area of the river as it floated down. Rockets exploded across the burning sky and fell to the ground in rapid succession. Deafened, Diu Ha and I dove behind an antique cabinet at the end of the room. My father had been nowhere in sight. That night he had stayed up late to read the French book that contrasted two warriors, North Vietnam's famed General Voi Nguyen Giap and William Westmoreland, commander of the U.S. troops in South Vietnam. Just before 4 o'clock, Cha, father in Vietnamese, he had left his bed and gone up to the rooftop terrace, where he marveled at the red and green tracers flying across the sky like shooting stars. Despite his interests in the generals, he had little understanding of the role of flares and traces as tools of warfare. They were simply a beautiful sight as they burst over the night sky. Your father's still up there. Been on that roof an hour. He'll get killed, Ma wailed as she came down the staircase. Seeing the windows open, she took us into a chamber behind the reception room. Where's Dio Kwai? She exclaimed. She was just on the stairs with me. In the midst of gunfire and explosions, my sister had gone back to bed, a mad thing to do since bullets were now flying indoors. By 1968, however, most of what Dio Kwai did was irrational. For 4 years, she had been showing signs of mental illness, ordering Dio Ha and me to sit still. My mother dashed back upstairs. A bullet came through Dio Kwai's room, hitting the lamp by her bedstand. Sparks flew in all directions. Ma grabbed my older sister by the wrist and led her downstairs, calling out to my father all the while. We shouldn't have worried too much, he said in the usual unruffled tone when he entered the room a few minutes later. When he had finally left the roof, he came downstairs to look for the butler, then ran into an office off the living room. I called a providential office. They said the fighting is far away. Look at the windows, my mother shot back. I did, Cha replied, still calm and composed. Our soldiers are still at their posts. From the rooftop, he had been able to see men in green surrounding their guest house. We gathered together, crouching on the floor. No one spoke. My father glanced at the spacious desk and heavy armchairs, hoping to hide behind the furniture until the gunfire died down. Between explosions came the sound of someone knocking at the front door. My parents put out their arms. We sat still. The pounding grew louder. After a moment of hesitation, Ma stood up. It's our soldiers, she declared. Come on. My sisters followed her through the reception area to the vestibule, as my father and I reached the door to the reception room. We heard her scream. My father led me back to the office in the back, locking the door behind him as quietly as possible. He went to the desk and I held his hand as we lowered ourselves behind it. My father didn't know what else to do. Spotting a steel safe in the corner of the room, he went over to open it, then without a word, closed again. Not even a 9-year-old boy could fit inside. I have a young son in the house, my mother was explaining to the intruder in the vestibule. Viet Cong soldiers in olive green uniforms. They wore no insignias or badges that showed affliction or rank. Whether because of the darkness or distance, his poor eyesight, or his unfamiliarity with military matters, my father had mistaken them for our own Southern Republic Army troops. One of the soldiers now threatened to shoot anyone still hiding in their house. Tell us where everyone is and you'll be safe, sister, he assured my mother. Please don't hurt us, please, she begged. Just let me go find my son. Cha groped behind the heavy, dark green drapes along the office wall, where a set of double doors opened into a hallway. We tiptoed through the hall to the doors that led outside. My father motioned me out first, then carefully closed the doors behind him. I ran down the steps and turned towards the hedges that separate the guest house from the riverbank. Hey, boy, someone cried to me. I turned. A Viet Cong soldier, sitting cross-legged, pointed his rifle at me. I ran back to my father. Back in the hallway inside the house, Cha quietly approached each door to the offices surrounding the reception area, a gun muzzle protruding from one, and we backed off. The doorway to yet another office had a gun muzzle poking out from it. There was no escape.
All right. Thank you. Okay. So that should be it for your papers. I just have to ask more questions.
That's fine.
What happened in the background? Do you remember?
What happened in the background was when it was the newly lunar year, Tet, in 1968. And it was they were just arriving at the guest house 2 days prior to the combat fighting.
Okay.
His father had been working as a civilian for the government of South Vietnam, assigned as for civilian duty to the military governor, based in Da Nang, I believe. A coastal town over in an hour's drive from Hue Ni, I believe. Hue Ha for the city.
Okay.
They were near, not Saigon, near Quezon area where the fighting was occurring. The mother, the father, and one older sister, one younger sister.
All right. I think you talked about some of the initiating events too. So I'll go. Yeah. What was the goal of the whole story?
Showing you the frivolity of the situation, that they were surrounded from all sides.
Okay.
In the obscurity of the darkness, ended up making it so they thought it was their own troops, but really it was the South Vietnamese army that was upon them.
Alright. Some of the events that happened, do you know?
Leading up, they were going to their grandparents' house because they felt it was safer with the marble granite walls, the heavy set walls and arches upon them. They thought they would love it. I mean, they'd be safer there than near the city. And Dwayne, who I believe it's called.
Okay. What is this story mostly about?
The experience of just normal day life, hanging out with family, trying to go on a vacation to get away from the fighting during the melancholy times of war. But the infectious nature of war falls upon people. And also, war never changes. They thought they would be safe and sound where they were, but it's like a virus. It always finds you. Is there anything else you needed to ask me about?
Yeah, I got a few more. I'm just trying to score you.
Okay.
Describe what the road and who looked like from the car as the family drove into town.
United States soldiers by Quezon. There were troops all over the place. The U.S. soldiers ready to fight and defend.
You're good.
Okay.
During the family's trip to Who, why did father choose to stay at the guest house instead of at the grandfather's house?
Because the guest house, they felt they would be safer. They were wrong. And that he'd be closer, not closer to his work. It'd be better off for him. And safer for his family, he believed, than to be near the war and the combat zones that were occurring on the 2 days before the lunar year of the Tet, in the year of the monkey on Tet.
Okay. Good enough. What was father's position within the government of the South Vietnam?
He was on civilian duty for the military, I believe. He had been working for the government of South Vietnam in Da Nang and coastal town as a civilian deputy, I believe, to the military government.
That's perfect. Why weren't the children afraid to go to sleep on the evening before New Year? despite all loud noises.
It seemed to me through the story they had become used to it, and that they thought the war wasn't be so close to them. They had become accustomed to it, so to speak. But from the way Mother was speaking to them, they thought that the war wasn't so close to their guest house and that they'd be safe there.
Okay.
From my understanding.
Okay. What was the father watching on the roof?
The flares and the tracer rounds going across the amber lights, and the amber lights going across the midnight skies of the clear and crystal clear horizon. In the darkness, though, the lights all made the light sky bright and shine up beyond the light.
Okay. What evidence does the author present that tells us the father doesn't know much about war?
He tried, it seems like to me he just joined or so, and that most war soldiers will work holidays and stuff like that, but it looks like he's just joined along the lines there, and that he was just trying to get on vacation or something like that, depending on and trying to keep his family safe. He was calm and collected during the firefight that occurred at the house, but he kept trying to run away and not defend his family.
Is that your answer?
Yeah.
Okay. Describe Chai's personality.
That was the son, right?
I can't tell you.
Oh wait, that was the son. Chai's personality was, he was scared at the time for when the fighting occurred. Wait, Chai's the daughter.
That's all right. We can move on.
Yeah.
What do you know? Why? Who do you know? Think is the author of the story?
The boy.
Boy. Okay. What happened to prevent their escape?
They were surrounded by all sides. And cut off from any chance of escape.
And that is it.
Is there anything else you need?
No, thank you.
So how did I do it?
Hold on, I'll tell you.